A 4-year-old boy looks at his mother and whispers something that makes her blood run cold. I saw Jesus when he was a child, and the Bible didn't tell everything. The family goes into shock when he reveals impossible details, names, places, events that were never written down. Scientists, theologians, and doctors cannot explain it. But what this child saw will shake everything you believed you knew about the lost years of Christ. Picture this: a normal Tuesday morning in a small town in Ohio. Sarah Mitchell is making breakfast for her son Colton. He's 4 years old, bright blue eyes, the kind of kid who loves dinosaurs and cartoons. Nothing unusual, nothing that would prepare her for what was about to happen. Colton sits at the kitchen table staring at his cereal, but he's not eating. He's just staring. Sarah asks him what's wrong, and that's when he says it. "Mommy, I need to tell you about Yeshua." Sarah freezes. Yeshua, that's the Hebrew name for Jesus. How does a 4-year-old know that? She never taught him that word. They go to church, sure, but a regular church. They call him Jesus, not Yeshua. She kneels down next to him. "Sweetie, what are you talking about?" And Colton looks at her with eyes that suddenly seem way too old for his little face. "I was there, Mommy. I was there when he was little like me." Now, before you think this is just a child's imagination running wild, let me tell you what happened next. Because what Colton described wasn't from any Sunday school lesson. It wasn't from any Bible story his parents ever read to him. And it certainly wasn't something he could have seen on TV. He started talking about a dusty village. He described the smell of olive wood burning. He talked about a boy with dark curly hair who could make broken things whole again just by touching them. He said the boy's name was Yeshua, and that he lived in a house with a red door. A red door. Sarah's hands are shaking now. She calls her husband Tom at work. "You need to come home right now." When Tom arrives, they sit Colton down and ask him to tell them everything. And what comes out of this little boy's mouth is something that will haunt them forever. Colton describes Yeshua as a child around 7 or 8 years old. He says Yeshua had a little sister that nobody talks about. Her name was Dinah. Now, the Bible never mentions Jesus having a sister named Dinah. In fact, the Bible barely mentions Jesus' childhood at all. There's the birth story, the flight to Egypt, and then one single story when he's 12 years old at the temple. That's it. 30 years of life, and we get maybe 3 stories. But Colton, this 4-year-old boy, is filling in the blanks with details so specific, so vivid, that his parents don't know what to think. He talks about how Yeshua would help his father Josip in the carpenter shop. He describes the tools, the smell of fresh-cut cedar, the way the sawdust would float in the sunlight coming through the window. He says Yeshua was kind but also different. The other children knew it. They could feel it. Here's where it gets really strange. Colton tells his parents about an incident that happened in the village. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, fell from a roof. Colton describes the scene in detail. The boy's name was Ezra. He fell while playing and hit his head on a stone. Everyone thought he was dead. The mothers were wailing. The father was holding his son's broken body. And then Yeshua came over. He was just a child himself, but he knelt down next to Ezra and put his hands on him. Colton says he could see light, not regular light, but light that felt warm and alive coming from Yeshua's hands. And Ezra opened his eyes. He sat up. He was completely fine. No blood, no injury, nothing. The adults were terrified. Some of them whispered that it was sorcery. Others fell to their knees. But Joseph grabbed Yeshua's hand and quickly took him home. And Joseph told him, "You must be careful, my son. The world is not ready for what you are." Now, if you're hearing this and feeling a chill run down your spine, you're not alone. Because here's the thing. There are ancient texts that were not included in the Bible, that tell similar stories. They're called the infancy gospels. These are writings from the early centuries after Christ that describe Jesus as a child performing miracles. Most churches don't talk about them because they're not considered canonical. They're not official, but they exist. And Colton, a 4-year-old boy from Ohio, is describing scenes that match these ancient texts that he's never read, that he's never even heard of. One of these texts is called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. It was written sometime in the 2nd century. And in it, there are stories of Jesus as a young boy bringing clay birds to life, healing the sick, even raising a child who fell from a roof. Does that sound familiar? It should, because that's exactly what Colton described. Sarah and Tom don't know what to do. They take Colton to their pastor. Pastor David has been in ministry for 30 years. He's seen a lot of things, but nothing like this. He sits down with Colton and asks him questions. "Where did you learn about Yeshua?" Colton shrugs. "I just remember it. Pastor David shows him pictures. Can you tell me what Jesus looked like as a child?" Colton points to one picture and says, "No, his hair was curlier, and his eyes were lighter, like honey." Pastor David feels a lump in his throat. He asks more questions, careful questions, trying to find a logical explanation, but there isn't one. Everything Colton says is consistent. He doesn't change his story, he doesn't contradict himself, and most unsettling of all, he speaks with a calmness and clarity that no 4-year-old should have. If you're still watching this, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now, because what I'm about to tell you next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew, and I need to know you're really paying attention. The family decides to take Colton to a child psychologist. Dr. Rebecca Lawson specializes in childhood development and memory. She's also a skeptic. She doesn't believe in past lives or supernatural memories. She thinks there's always a logical explanation. So she sits down with Colton and uses every technique she knows to try to figure out where these memories are coming from. She asks him about his favorite movies. Has he seen The Passion of the Christ? No. Has he watched any Bible cartoons? Yes, but only VeggieTales. And those vegetables definitely don't talk about Jesus having a sister named Dinah. Doctor. Lawson tries age regression therapy, play therapy, even just casual conversation. And every time, Colton remains consistent. He draws pictures of the village. He draws the house with the red door. He draws Yeshua with his curly hair and honey-colored eyes. After 6 sessions, Dr. Lawson calls Sarah and Tom in for a meeting. She closes the door and sits down with a look on her face that they've never seen before. She looks shaken. "I don't have an explanation," she says. "His memories are too detailed, too consistent for a child his age. He's not making this up. He's not repeating something he heard. He genuinely believes he experienced these things." "But how is that possible?" Tom asks. Dr. Lawson takes off her glasses and rubs her eyes. "I don't know. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it. There are documented cases of children claiming to remember past lives, but those are usually investigated by very specific researchers. This is beyond my expertise." She gives them a name. Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia. He's one of the world's leading researchers on children who claim to remember previous lives. If anyone can help you understand what's happening with Colton, it's him. Now here's where this story takes another turn, because Sarah and Tom aren't sure they want to go down that road. They're Christians. They believe in one life, one death, and then eternity. The idea of reincarnation goes against everything they were taught, but they also can't ignore what's happening with their son. So they pray about it. They ask God for guidance. And after weeks of wrestling with this decision, they decide to reach out to Dr. Tucker. When Dr. Tucker hears Colton's story, he's immediately interested. He's investigated hundreds of cases like this, children who remember details from lives they couldn't possibly know about. Most of the cases he studies involve children who remember being someone specific, someone whose life can be verified through historical records. But this case is different. Colton isn't claiming to have been someone else. He's claiming to have witnessed the childhood of Jesus Christ. That's not something you can verify with birth certificates or newspaper clippings. Dr. Tucker flies to Ohio to meet Colton in person. He brings recording equipment, notebooks, a team of researchers. They spend 3 days with the family, documenting everything Colton says. They ask him to describe the village in detail. What did the houses look like? What did people wear? What did they eat? And Colton answers every question with confidence. He talks about flatbread cooked on hot stones. He describes robes made of rough wool. He talks about a well in the center of the village where the women would gather to draw water. He even describes the landscape, the hills in the distance, the olive groves, the dusty roads. Dr. Tucker compares Colton's descriptions to historical records of first-century Galilee, and here's what he finds. Everything matches. The architecture, the clothing, the food, the geography, everything. Colton is describing a world that existed 2,000 years ago with an accuracy that shouldn't be possible for a 4-year-old from Ohio. But Dr. Tucker is a scientist. He needs more than just descriptions. He needs something verifiable. So he asks Colton about specific events. Did anything unusual happen in the village while you were there? Colton thinks for a moment and then nods. There was a fire, a big fire. It started in the night and burned down several houses. Everyone was so scared. People were running and screaming. But Yeshua, He wasn't scared. He stood in the middle of it all and he prayed, and the wind changed. Just like that, the wind changed and the fire went away from the houses. It went out into the fields where it couldn't hurt anyone. Dr. Tucker writes this down. He asks for more details. When did this happen? What season? Colton says it was cold. There was frost on the ground in the morning, so probably winter. Dr. Tucker makes a note to research historical records of fires in first century Galilee. It's a long shot, but if there's any documentation of unusual weather patterns or fires in that region during that time period, it could be significant. At this point, I want you to do something. Head down to the comments right now and click on the pinned link. I've put together a free digital ebook about natural health and healing. It's completely free, no catch. Just click the link, download it, and discover powerful natural remedies that have been used for thousands of years. Trust me, you're going to want this. Now let's get back to the story. While Dr. Tucker is conducting his investigation, word starts to get out about Colton's story. The family didn't want publicity, but news travels fast in a small town. Soon reporters are calling. News vans are parked outside their house. Everyone wants to know about the boy who remembers Jesus' childhood. Some people are supportive. They call the family blessed. They say Colton is a gift from God, but others are hostile. They call it blasphemy. They say the family is making it up for attention. They accuse Sarah and Tom of coaching their son, of using him to get famous. The family's church is divided. Some members believe Colton. Others think the family should be asked to leave the congregation. Pastor David tries to keep the peace, but it's hard. This story is tearing the community apart. And through all of this, Colton remains calm. He doesn't understand why people are so upset. He's just telling the truth. He saw what he saw. He remembers what he remembers. Why is that so hard for people to believe? One night, after a particularly difficult day at school where some kids made fun of him, Colton asks his mom a question. "Mommy, why are people so mean when I talk about Yeshua? They love Jesus at church. Why don't they want to hear about when he was little like me?" Sarah doesn't have a good answer. She holds her son close and tells him that sometimes people are scared of things they don't understand. And that's the truth, isn't it? People are scared. Because if Colton's memories are real, if he really did witness the childhood of Jesus, then that changes things. It means there's more to the story than what we've been told. It means the Bible, as complete as we believe it to be, is missing chapters. Let's talk about those missing chapters for a moment. The Bible tells us almost nothing about Jesus' childhood. He's born. There's the story of the wise men. The family flees to Egypt to escape King Herod. And then we jump to Jesus at age 12 in the temple. After that, nothing until he starts his ministry at age 30. That's 18 years of silence. 18 years where we have no idea what Jesus was doing, where he was, how he was growing into the man who would change the world. Why the silence? Some scholars believe it's because nothing significant happened during those years. Jesus was just a normal kid growing up in a normal family, but others believe the silence is intentional. Maybe there were things that happened during those years that the early church leaders didn't want people to know about. Maybe there were miracles, teachings, events that didn't fit the narrative they were trying to build. And that's where the infancy gospels come in. These texts were written in the early centuries of Christianity, but they were eventually deemed non-canonical by church councils. They were excluded from the Bible. Why? Because they contained stories that were considered too fantastical, too controversial. Stories of a young Jesus who was powerful, sometimes even frightening. In the infancy gospel of Thomas, there's a story where Jesus curses a boy who bumps into him, and the boy withers and dies. Later, Jesus brings him back to life. There's another story where Jesus' teacher tries to discipline him, and Jesus rebukes him with wisdom far beyond his years, leaving the teacher humiliated. These stories paint a picture of a child who was still learning to control his divine power, who was still figuring out how to be both fully God and fully human, and that made people uncomfortable. So the stories were suppressed, hidden away, labeled as apocryphal. But what if those stories contain truth? What if Colton's memories are confirming what these ancient texts have been saying all along? That Jesus' childhood was anything but ordinary, that there were miracles, struggles, moments of humanity mixed with divinity. If that's true, then we've been missing a huge part of the story. And maybe, just maybe, God is using a 4-year-old boy from Ohio to remind us of that. Now I know some of you are skeptical. You're thinking, come on, this is just a child with an overactive imagination. And I get it. I really do. Skepticism is healthy. We should question things. But here's what I want you to consider. Colton's story isn't unique. There are other documented cases of children remembering things they shouldn't be able to remember. Dr. Tucker has investigated over 2,000 cases. Many of them have been verified. Children who remember names, places, events from lives they never lived. Children who speak languages they were never taught. Children who recognize people they never met. One famous case involved a boy named James Leininger. At age 2, he started having nightmares about a plane crash. He would scream, "Airplane crash on fire. Little man can't get out." His parents were disturbed but assumed it was just bad dreams. But then James started giving details. He said his plane was a Corsair. He said it took off from a boat. He said he was shot down by the Japanese. He even gave the name of the boat, the Natoma. His parents did some research and discovered that there was indeed a ship called the USS Natoma Bay that served in World War II. And there was a pilot named James Houston who flew a Corsair off that ship and was shot down by the Japanese. Little James Leininger knew details about James Houston's life and death that he could not have possibly known. His story was investigated, documented, and verified. So if that can happen, why can't Colton's story be real? Here's another thing to consider. Colton's memories started when he was very young, around age 3. This is actually common in these cases. Most children who claim to remember past lives start talking about them between the ages of 2 and 5. And usually, by the time they're 7 or 8, the memories start to fade. It's as if there's a window of time when the veil between this life and whatever came before is thin. And then, as the child grows and becomes more grounded in their current life, the memories slip away. Sarah and Tom know this. They know they might only have a few more years before Colton forgets everything. So they're documenting it all. They're writing down everything he says, recording conversations, asking him to draw pictures, because they know that one day he might not remember any of this, and they want to preserve it. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I am, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now, because there's so much more to explore, and I don't want you to miss a single detail. Just hit that subscribe button, and let's keep going. Dr. Tucker's investigation continues for months. He interviews Colton multiple times, always looking for inconsistencies, always trying to poke holes in the story. But he can't. Everything Colton says remains consistent. More importantly, Colton shows signs of what researchers call spontaneous recall. He's not being prompted or coached. He just brings up these memories randomly at unexpected times. One day he's playing with toy cars and suddenly he stops and says, Yeshua had a wooden cart that his father made. It had wheels that squeaked. He would pull it around the village and collect sticks for the fire. Sarah writes it down. Another time he's eating dinner and he says, Yeshua's mother, she made the best lentil soup. She would put herbs in it from the garden. Little random details that a child wouldn't think to make up if he was fabricating a story. Dr. Tucker also notices something else. When Colton talks about these memories, his vocabulary changes. He uses words that a 4-year-old shouldn't know. Words like carpenter's plane and awl and cistern. When Dr. Tucker asks him what these words mean, Colton can explain them. The carpenter's plane is the tool you use to make wood smooth. The awl is the pointy thing you use to make holes. The cistern is where you store water under the ground. How does he know this? Sarah and Tom certainly didn't teach him. They're not carpenters. They don't have cisterns. But somehow, Colton knows. It's as if the memories come with the knowledge embedded in them. Now, let's talk about something that's been on everyone's mind. If Colton's memories are real, what does that mean theologically? Because here's the problem. Christianity doesn't teach reincarnation. The Bible says, it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. One life, one death, one eternity. So how do we reconcile Colton's story with Christian doctrine? Some theologians argue that Colton's memories aren't proof of reincarnation. They suggest that what he's experiencing might be something else entirely. Perhaps he's tapping into the collective consciousness, a shared spiritual memory that all humans have access to. Or maybe he's receiving visions from God, divine downloads of information meant to teach us something. Others propose that Colton might have been given a special glimpse into the past, a supernatural gift that allows him to see events as if he were there, without actually having lived through them. But then there are those who say, maybe we've been wrong about reincarnation all along. Maybe it's not incompatible with Christianity. After all, in the Bible, the disciples asked Jesus about a man who was born blind. Teacher, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Think about that question. How could a man sin before he was born unless he had a previous life? Jesus doesn't rebuke them for asking. He simply says that the man's blindness was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. But the fact that the disciples even asked the question suggests that the concept of pre-existence wasn't foreign to them. There's also the curious case of John the Baptist. Jesus says that John is Elijah who is to come. Now, some interpret this metaphorically, that John came in the spirit and power of Elijah. But others wonder if Jesus meant it more literally. Was John the Baptist actually Elijah reincarnated? The text doesn't give us a clear answer. The point is, there's more mystery in the Bible than we sometimes want to admit. And maybe Colton's story is inviting us to sit with that mystery instead of rushing to explain it away. Sarah and Tom have had to wrestle with all of these questions. They've talked to pastors, theologians, Bible scholars. Everyone has a different opinion. Some tell them that Colton's memories are a gift from God. Others warn them that it could be demonic deception. The family is exhausted from trying to figure it out. Finally, Pastor David gives them some advice that brings them peace. He says, "You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to defend Colton's story or explain it. Just love your son, teach him about Jesus, and trust that God knows what he's doing. If this is real, God will make it clear in his timing. If it's not, it will fade away." Either way, your job is to be faithful parents, not theologians. That advice helps. Sarah and Tom decide to stop fighting battles they can't win. They stop reading the comments online. They stop arguing with people at church. They just focus on Colton. And as they do, something beautiful happens. Colton's faith grows. He talks to Yeshua like he's a friend. He prays with a simplicity and confidence that's stunning. One night, Sarah overhears him praying in his room. "Yeshua, thank you for letting me remember you. I hope I'm doing okay at telling people about you. I know some people don't believe me, but that's okay. You know it's true, and that's all that matters." Sarah stands outside his door with tears streaming down her face. Whatever is happening with her son, one thing is certain. It's bringing him closer to Jesus. Months turn into a year. Colton is now 5 years old. His memories are still vivid, but Dr. Tucker warns the family that they might start to fade soon. That's typical for these cases, so they make sure to capture as much as they can. One day, Dr. Tucker asks Colton a question that he's been hesitant to ask. "Colton, do you remember how your time with Yeshua ended? Why did you stop being there?" Colton gets quiet. He stares down at his hands. Then he says, "I didn't want to leave, but it was time. I had to go." "Where did you go?" Colton shrugs. "I don't know. It's like I fell asleep and then I woke up and I was a baby here. Do you know why you came here? Why you were born into this family?" Colton looks up at Dr. Tucker with those big blue eyes. "I think I'm supposed to tell people about Yeshua. Not just the grown-up Yeshua that everyone knows, but the little boy Yeshua. Because he was a kid once, just like me. And if he was a kid, then that means God understands what it's like to be a kid. That's important. People need to know that." In that moment, Dr. Tucker realizes something profound. Whether or not Colton's memories are literally true, whether he actually witnessed the childhood of Jesus or not, the message he's carrying is powerful. God became a child. The creator of the universe experienced scraped knees and hurt feelings and the joy of playing with friends. He wasn't born as a full-grown man ready to start his ministry. He went through every stage of human development. And that means there's no part of our human experience that God doesn't understand. That's the heart of the gospel. Emmanuel, God with us. Not just God above us or God beyond us, but God with us, in the mess and beauty of human life. And if it takes a 4-year-old boy with impossible memories to remind us of that, then maybe that's exactly what God intended. Now here's where I want to ask you something. Have you hit that share button yet? Because this story needs to be heard. I don't care if people believe it or not. What matters is that it gets people thinking, questioning, seeking. So do me a favor. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Post it on your social media. Send it to a friend. Let's get this message out there. As Colton gets older, his memories do start to fade, just like Dr. Tucker predicted. By the time he's 7, he doesn't bring up Yeshua as much. When his parents ask him about it, He says he still remembers, but it's like trying to remember a dream. The details are fuzzy now. The colors aren't as bright. The emotions aren't as strong. But there's one memory that stays crystal clear. He remembers the last time he saw Yeshua. It was at the well in the village. Yeshua was getting water for his mother. Colton, or whoever he was back then, was standing nearby. Yeshua turned and looked at him and smiled. And in that smile, Colton felt something he can't quite put into words. Love, yes, but more than that. Peace, acceptance, a sense that everything was going to be okay, not just in that moment but forever. Yeshua didn't say anything. He just smiled. And then he walked away, carrying the water jar back to the house with the red door. And that's the last thing Colton remembers. That memory, that smile, becomes an anchor for Colton as he grows up. Middle school is hard. Kids can be cruel. He gets teased for being the weird kid who claimed to remember Jesus. But whenever he feels alone or scared, he thinks about that smile, and it helps. High school is better. He finds a group of friends who accept him. He plays on the basketball team. He gets good grades. He's just a regular teenager, except for the fact that he has this strange story in his past. Sometimes new friends will hear about it and ask him if it's true, and Colton always gives the same answer. I know what I experienced. I know what I remember. You can believe it or not. That's up to you. But for me, it's real, and it changed my life. When Colton turns 18, a filmmaker reaches out to the family. She wants to make a documentary about his story. Sarah and Tom are hesitant. They've been out of the spotlight for years, and they kind of like it that way. But Colton surprises them. He says he wants to do it, not for fame or attention, but because he thinks his story might help people. So they agree. The documentary takes a year to make. It features interviews with Colton, his parents, Dr. Tucker, Pastor David, and several theologians and historians. It explores the mystery of Colton's memories, the infancy gospels, the missing years of Jesus' life, and the bigger questions about faith, memory, and the supernatural. When it's released, it goes viral. Millions of people watch it. Some are moved to tears, others are angry. The debates rage on social media. But the film accomplishes what Colton hoped it would. It gets people talking about Jesus in a new way. One of the most touching responses comes from a woman named Maria. She emails the family with her story. She says she's been a Christian her whole life, but she's always struggled to connect with Jesus. He seemed too distant, too perfect, too divine. But after watching the documentary and hearing Colton describe Jesus as a little boy, scraped knees and all, something clicked for her. For the first time, she understood that Jesus really was human. He really did experience everything we experience, and that made her love him in a deeper way. She says, "Thank you for sharing your son's story. It brought Jesus to life for me in a way that years of church never did." Sarah reads that email and cries, because that's exactly what this was all about. Not proving anything, not convincing skeptics, just helping people see Jesus more clearly. Now, I want you to do something real quick. Hit that hype button. You know, that little button that shows you're excited about this content. Because this story isn't over yet. There's more to tell, and I need to know you're still with me. As the years go by, Colton goes to college. He majors in religious studies. He wants to understand the historical Jesus, the texts that were included in the Bible and the ones that weren't, the cultural context of first-century Judea. He devours books, takes classes, learns Greek and Hebrew. His professors are fascinated by him. They know his story, of course. One professor, Dr. Elaine Whitfield, takes him under her wing. She's an expert on the infancy gospels. She spent her career studying these texts that most Christians don't even know exist. She tells Colton that his memories, whether they're literal or symbolic, align remarkably well with the themes in these ancient writings. The idea of Jesus as a child learning to navigate his divine power, the tension between his humanity and his divinity, the fear and wonder he inspired in those around him. It's all there in the texts. Dr. Whitfield introduces Colton to other scholars who are interested in his story. Together, they analyze every detail he's shared over the years. They compare it to historical records, archaeological findings, and ancient texts. And while they can't prove that Colton's memories are real, they also can't find any evidence that they're false. Everything he's described is historically plausible. The architecture, the clothing, the food, the social customs, it all fits. and the emotional truth of his story resonates with what we know about the Incarnation. God became human in the fullest sense. That means he was a baby who cried, a toddler who learned to walk, a child who played and learned and grew. Colton's story, real or not, invites us to sit with that reality, to marvel at the humility of God, to worship a Savior who knows what it's like to be human because he's been human from the very beginning. One day, Colton is sitting in the university library, surrounded by books about early Christianity. He's working on his senior thesis. The topic, the lost years of Jesus and why they matter. As he's writing, he has a sudden realization. Maybe the details of his memories aren't the point. Maybe the point is the question they raise. Why are we so uncomfortable with the idea of Jesus as a child? Why do we prefer to focus on his ministry, his miracles, his death and resurrection? Is it because a child Jesus is harder to control, harder to fit into our neat theological boxes? A baby in a manger is sweet and safe. A man on a cross is powerful and redemptive. But a 7-year-old boy with divine power learning to navigate the world, that's unpredictable, that's wild, and maybe that's exactly why we need to think about it. Colton writes in his thesis, if we only focus on Jesus the man, we miss the full picture of the Incarnation. God didn't just visit earth as an adult. He entered into the full human experience, from conception to death. Every stage of life was sanctified by his presence. Childhood matters. Adolescence matters. The silent years matter, because they tell us that God isn't just interested in our productive, adult, ministry-focused years. He's interested in all of it. He values the time we spend growing, learning, becoming who we're meant to be. If Jesus spent 30 years preparing for 3 years of ministry, what does that tell us about the value of preparation, of waiting, of the hidden years that no one sees? His thesis is published in a journal of religious studies. It gets attention. Some scholars praise it. Others critique it, but it sparks conversations, and that's all Colton wanted. He's not trying to prove that his childhood memories were real. He's just trying to explore what they mean, whether they happened or not. Because in the end, the story itself has power. It points to a truth that's bigger than any one person's experience. The truth that God is with us, not just in our highlight moments, but in the ordinary, everyday, growing up moments too. After graduation, Colton is invited to speak at churches, conferences, and universities. He's hesitant at first. He doesn't want to be known as the guy with the weird Jesus memories. But his mom reminds him of what he said when he was 5 years old. I think I'm supposed to tell people about Yeshua. So he starts accepting invitations. His talks aren't what people expect. He doesn't spend the whole time telling his story. Instead, he talks about the humanity of Christ. He talks about how Jesus understands loneliness because he experienced it. How Jesus understands fear because he felt it in the Garden of Gethsemane. How Jesus understands joy because he celebrated at weddings and laughed with his friends. And yes, how Jesus understands childhood because he was a child once. He played, he learned, he grew. People are moved by these talks. After one event, a teenage girl comes up to Colton with tears in her eyes. She says, "I've always felt like Jesus couldn't relate to me because I'm just a kid. But hearing you talk about him being a child too, it makes me feel like he really does understand what I'm going through." Colton hugs her and says, "He absolutely does. He knows what it's like to be your age. He's been there." That moment confirms for Colton that he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. Not convincing people that his memories are real, but helping people see Jesus as fully human and fully divine, a Savior who walked every step of the human journey. Now here's something interesting that happens. As Colton shares his story over the years, other people start coming forward with similar experiences. A woman in her 60s writes to him. She says that when she was a little girl, she had vivid dreams of being in ancient Jerusalem. She saw Jesus teaching in the temple courts. She describes details that she couldn't have known as a child. A man in his 40s reaches out. He says that he's always had inexplicable knowledge about first-century Jewish customs. He knows the prayers, the rituals, the way of life, even though he was raised in a completely secular home. He's been too afraid to talk about it until he heard Colton's story. These testimonies keep coming. Some of them are vague and hard to verify, but others are remarkably specific, and all of them point to the same thing. There's something about the life of Jesus that captures the human imagination in a profound way. Whether these people are remembering actual past experiences or tapping into some kind of collective spiritual memory, the effect is the same. They feel closer to Jesus. They understand him better. They love him more deeply. Dr. Tucker continues to study these cases. He now has a whole file dedicated to what he calls Jesus encounter memories, children and adults who claim to have witnessed events from Jesus' life. He's careful not to make any definitive claims about what these memories are or where they come from, but he notes that they all share certain characteristics. They're vivid, emotionally charged, and consistent over time. They often include details that align with historical records, and they tend to have a transformative effect on the person experiencing them. Whether you believe these memories are literal or symbolic, the phenomenon is real, and it's worth studying. One of the most compelling cases Dr. Tucker investigates involves a 6-year-old girl named Emma. She lives in England and has never been to the Middle East, but she starts drawing pictures of a dusty village with flat-roofed houses. She draws a man with a beard teaching a group of people. She says his name is Rabbi Yeshua. Her parents are stunned. They're not religious. They've never taught her about Jesus, but Emma keeps talking about him. She says he told stories that made people think. She remembers one story about a farmer planting seeds. Some seeds fell on the path and birds ate them. Some fell on rocky ground and couldn't grow deep roots. Some fell among thorns and got choked out. But some fell on good soil and produced a huge harvest. Emma tells this story with such clarity and detail that her parents are convinced she didn't make it up. Of course, this is the parable of the sower, one of Jesus's most famous teachings. But Emma has never been to church or Sunday school. How does she know this story? Her parents contact Dr. Tucker. He interviews Emma extensively, and just like with Colton, he finds that her memories are consistent and detailed. She describes Jesus as kind, but also challenging. She says he asked hard questions that made people uncomfortable. She remembers the way the sunlight would shine through the dust when he was teaching outside. She talks about the smell of fish and bread. She even describes the sound of his voice, deep and warm and safe. When Dr. Tucker compares Emma's descriptions to the gospel accounts, he finds that they align. Not perfectly, but enough to be intriguing. Emma's case becomes another piece of the puzzle, another child with impossible memories of Jesus. Now let me ask you something. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Because I am. And if you're as fascinated by this as I am, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're diving deep into some of the most mysterious and beautiful truths about faith, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Back to Colton. He's now in his mid-20s. He's married to a wonderful woman named Grace. They're expecting their first child, and as Colton prepares to become a father, he finds himself thinking a lot about Joseph and Mary. What must it have been like for them to raise the Son of God? How did they balance treating him like a normal child while also knowing he was divine? Did they ever doubt? Did they ever wonder if they were doing it right? These questions consume Colton. One night, he's lying in bed next to Grace, his hand on her growing belly, and he starts to cry. She asks him what's wrong, and he says, "I'm scared. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not a good enough father?" And Grace, wise beyond her years, says to him, "Every parent feels that way, but you know something that most people don't. You know that Jesus was a child once. You know that even God chose to experience the vulnerability of childhood. So if God trusted humans to raise him, then he trusts you to raise this baby too." Those words bring Colton such comfort, and when their daughter is born, they name her Dinah, after the little girl that Colton remembered, Yeshua's sister. Some people think it's strange, others think it's beautiful, but for Colton and Grace, it's a way of honoring the memories that changed Colton's life. Little Dinah grows up hearing stories about her namesake. She knows that her daddy had special memories when he was little. She doesn't fully understand it, but she thinks it's cool, and she loves hearing stories about Jesus as a child. Her favorite is the one about Yeshua helping his father in the carpenter shop. She imagines Jesus as a little boy, covered in sawdust, learning how to use tools, making mistakes, and trying again. It makes Jesus feel real to her in a way that stained glass windows never could. As Dinah gets older, Colton notices something. She has a deep intuitive understanding of spiritual things. She asks questions that kids her age shouldn't be able to formulate. One day, when she's 5 years old, she asks, "Daddy, if Jesus was a little boy once, does that mean God knows what it's like to be scared of the dark?" Colton's eyes fill with tears. "Yes, sweetheart, I think he does." And Dinah nods, satisfied. "Good, because sometimes I get scared, and it's nice to know that Jesus understands." Colton realizes in that moment that his story, his memories, his journey. It's all been leading to this. Helping the next generation see Jesus not as a distant figure in a history book, but as someone who walked the same path they're walking, someone who truly understands. Years pass. Colton continues his work, speaking, writing, helping people connect with the humanity of Christ. His memories from childhood have faded significantly now. He can barely remember the details anymore. It's like trying to recall a dream from years ago, but the impact of those memories remains. They shaped his faith, his calling, his entire life, and he's grateful for that. One day he receives an email from Dr. Tucker. The researcher is now elderly and nearing retirement. He's writing a final book about all the cases he's studied over the decades, and he wants to include Colton's story. He asks Colton to write a reflection on what the experience has meant to him. Colton sits down at his computer and begins to type. He writes, "When I was 4 years old, I had memories that didn't make sense. Memories of a time and place I'd never been. Memories of a boy named Yeshua who could do impossible things. For years I tried to understand what those memories meant. Were they real? Were they symbolic? Were they a gift from God or a trick of my mind? I still don't have all the answers, but here's what I know. Those memories brought me closer to Jesus. They helped me understand that the incarnation wasn't just about God putting on flesh for 33 years. It was about God entering into every stage of human development, from conception to death, from helplessness to power, from learning to teaching. The Jesus I encountered in my memories wasn't the Jesus of Sunday school flannel graphs. He was real. He was complicated. He was fully human and fully divine. And that Jesus changed my life." He continues, "I don't need anyone to believe my story. I don't need scholars to verify my memories or theologians to approve my interpretations. What I need is for people to encounter Jesus, really encounter him, not just the sanitized version we're comfortable with, but the wild, mysterious, fully human and fully divine Savior who knows what it's like to be us, because he's been us. If my story helps even one person see Jesus more clearly, then it was worth it. All the skepticism, all the criticism, all the years of questions, it was all worth it." Dr. Tucker includes Colton's reflection in his book. The book becomes a bestseller. It sparks new conversations about faith, memory, and the nature of spiritual experiences. Some readers are convinced that cases like Colton's prove reincarnation. Others maintain that they're simply vivid religious visions. But most readers land somewhere in the middle. They're willing to sit with the mystery, to admit that there's more to this life than we can see or understand, to acknowledge that God might work in ways that don't fit our neat categories. And that's really the heart of Colton's story, isn't it? It's not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to ask the questions. It's about being open to the possibility that God is bigger, stranger, more mysterious than we thought. It's about remembering that Jesus was a child once, that he scraped his knees and laughed with friends and learned to read and helped his dad in the workshop, that he was fully, completely, wonderfully human. And because he was human, he understands us, all of us, in every stage of life, in every struggle and joy. He's been there. He knows. Now, before we wrap this up, I want you to do one more thing for me. See that like button? Give it a click, because stories like this need to be shared. They need to be celebrated. They remind us that faith isn't just about believing the right things. It's about encountering a living God who knows us and loves us and became one of us. So hit that like button and let's keep this conversation going. Colton is now in his 30s. His daughter Dinah is 8 years old. One evening, they're sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Dinah turns to her father and asks, "Daddy, do you still remember Yeshua?" Colton pauses. He's honest with her. "Not really, sweetheart. It's been so long. The memories are mostly gone now." Dinah looks sad. That makes her father smile. "But you know what? Even though I can't remember the details anymore, I remember the feeling. I remember feeling loved. I remember feeling like everything was going to be okay. And that feeling has never left me." Dinah thinks about this. "So even though you forgot the story, you didn't forget the love." Exactly. Because love is what lasts. Stories fade, memories blur, but love remains. That night, after Dinah is asleep, Colton goes outside and looks up at the stars. He thinks about all the years since those childhood memories first surfaced. The confusion, the controversy, the questions, but also the beauty, the growth, the lives that were touched by his story. He thinks about the little boy version of himself who bravely shared what he remembered. even when adults didn't believe him. He's proud of that little boy, and he's grateful for the journey. He whispers a prayer into the night sky. Thank you, Jesus, for letting me remember you. Thank you for being human. Thank you for understanding what it's like to be a child, to grow up, to live this messy, beautiful life. Help me to live in a way that honors the gift you gave me. Help me to help others see you clearly, not just as the King of Kings, but as the boy from Nazareth who became the Savior of the world. As Colton stands there under the stars, he feels a warmth wash over him. It's the same warmth he felt in his memories all those years ago, the warmth of being known, being loved, being held by a God who understands. And in that moment, he knows with absolute certainty that whether his memories were literal or symbolic, divine vision or childhood imagination, they pointed to a truth that is undeniably real. God is with us, Emmanuel, not just in the big moments, but in the small ones. Not just in our victories, but in our struggles. Not just when we're strong, but when we're weak. God is with us because God became us. And that changes everything. The documentary about Colton's life is updated with new footage now that he's an adult. The filmmaker interviews him one last time. She asks him the question everyone wants to know. If you could go back and experience those memories one more time, would you? Colton doesn't hesitate. No. And when she looks surprised, he explains. Those memories were a gift for a specific season of my life. They served their purpose. They brought me to Jesus in a deeper way. But I don't need them anymore. Because now I have something better. I have a relationship with Jesus that's built on faith, not memory. I have a life devoted to helping others know him. I have a family that loves him. The memories were the beginning, but they're not the destination. Jesus is the destination, and I'm walking toward him every day. The filmmaker smiles. That's beautiful. And Colton nods. It is beautiful. All of it. The mystery, the questions, the faith required to keep believing even when the memories fade. That's what it means to follow Jesus. It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting that he has them, and that's enough. As the years continue to roll by, Colton's story becomes one of many. There are books written about children with past life memories. There are scientific studies, theological debates, documentaries, and podcasts. But for Colton, it's not about being famous or being right. It's about being faithful. Faithful to what he experienced. Faithful to the calling he sensed even as a small child. Faithful to the Jesus who was a boy once, just like him. And that faithfulness bears fruit. People's lives are changed. Faith is strengthened. Questions are asked that lead to deeper understanding. And Jesus, the boy from Nazareth, the carpenter's son, the Savior of the world, is seen more clearly. One last story before we finish. Colton is invited to speak at a large church conference. Thousands of people are there. He's nervous. He's shared his story hundreds of times, but it never gets easier. He prays before going on stage. Give me the words, Jesus. Help me point people to you. He walks out onto the stage and the crowd grows quiet. He takes a deep breath and begins. When I was 4 years old, I remembered something impossible. And for years I tried to figure out what it meant. But I've realized that the meaning isn't in the memories themselves. The meaning is in what they reveal. That Jesus was a child once. That God chose to experience every stage of human life, including the vulnerability and wonder of childhood. And if God was willing to be that human, that vulnerable, that real, then there's nothing about our lives that he doesn't understand. The crowd is silent. You see, Colton continues, we like our Jesus manageable. We like him on a cross where we can understand his sacrifice. We like him in a manger where we can celebrate his birth. But a 7-year-old Jesus learning to hammer nails? A 10-year-old Jesus dealing with bullies? A teenage Jesus going through puberty? That's uncomfortable, but it's also beautiful. Because it means there's no part of your life that's too ordinary, too messy, too human for Jesus to understand. He's been there, he's lived it, and he's with you in it right now. The applause is thunderous. People are crying. Because in that moment something shifts. Jesus becomes more real, more accessible, more wonderful, not less divine, but more human. And somehow, mysteriously, that makes him more divine. After the conference, dozens of people come up to Colton. They share their stories, their struggles, their questions, and Colton listens to each one with compassion and patience. Because he remembers what it was like to have questions that no one could answer. He remembers feeling alone in his experience, and he doesn't want anyone else to feel that way. He prays with them. He encourages them. He points them to Jesus, always to Jesus. As the last person walks away, Colton sits down in an empty chair and closes his eyes. He's exhausted but fulfilled. This is what he was born to do, not to have all the answers, but to ask the right questions, and to help people encounter the Jesus who was a child once, who grew into a man, who died and rose again, and who is still with us today. Emmanuel, God with us, always. Don't leave just yet. I have something important to tell you. You've made it this far in this incredible journey, and I don't want you to go without knowing that there's so much more content like this waiting for you on this channel. Stories that will challenge what you think you know. Stories that will deepen your faith. Stories that will remind you that God is bigger, stranger, and more wonderful than you ever imagined. So here's what I want you to do. Don't click away. Stay right here on this channel. Scroll down and find the next video. Click on it. Let's keep this conversation going, because your faith is worth investing in. Your questions are worth exploring, and Jesus, the one who was a child once and who understands you completely, is worth knowing more deeply. So go ahead, pick another video, and let's continue this journey together. I'll see you in the next one.